Welcome back to the Tuxes and Tomahawks podcast. My name is Adam Dorito, and today I'm interviewing the Dos Equis man, the most interesting man in the world, Brady Knowlton. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure. I love the synth pop freaking intro. Whoever did that, you got to give him top marks.
I know. He's great, right?
I felt like I was like in 1984 Manchester at the 24-hour party people club, or like the rehab pool in Vegas. That was cool, man.
Yeah, that's like the whole point. Like, if it's not 84 Miami's Vice, running around in a Lamborghini Countach, then what are we even doing with our lives, right?
So go get my Don Johnson outfit. We'll keep kicking this, man. I like
Hell it. Yeah. So tell everybody who you are. Your bio is fascinating for everyone who hasn't read, the intro to Brady's podcast today. But like, I can't even comprehend how I even introduce you. Where did you come from? Where did you grow up? How did you even become the man you are today?
Well, so I guess to start off, I was a private equity guy in oil and gas. And
oh yeah, it's my line of work.
When I was young, my father was a funeral director, and I'm originally from southwestern Missouri, so I feel qualified to identify white trash, old chap. And so we lived in rural poverty, and my father pulled us up by his bootstraps. And he ended up moving to Texas in the middle of my childhood, and got in the oil and gas business. So we moved a lot, and I moved 14 times before high school. And during that time, my best friends were books, and I read about like swashbuckling adventures and explorers in Africa. And in our value system, growing up, the people that we knew were wealthy were people that like could go on a mule deer hunt in New Mexico or Colorado. And that's what we aspired to do. And so as we got into the middle class, middle class when I was a teenager, I tell people when we first came to Texas, there's this funny story. We thought that it was so funny that people in Texas didn't pick the bobcats and the coyotes off the side of the highway, the roadkill, to skin them. Yeah. And we thought you guys were we just thought they were like leaving money on the side of the highway.
Yep.
And so we moved into a middle-class neighborhood, and we had a dog run behind our house, and it was covered in hides. And we thought that we were like flexing, showing off to the neighbors, but we later learned that they were like mortified that the Beverly Hillbillies kind of had moved in. And so what we wanted to do with our lives was just hunt and fish. And as I got more money, I spent it, man, and I don't feel like I wasted it. So I've been all over the world hunting and fishing in 60 countries. I got hand fishing, aka noodling, legalized in Texas. In 2011 or 12, I had a show on Animal Planet catching catfish. I love Africa. I'm getting ready to go on my 28th safari in Africa. So I've been over there 28 times. I have a restaurant in Mexico where I do a lot of spearfishing. Mm-hmm. And that's my primary passion, is freedive spearfishing. And so as life's gone on, I have just been involved in a lot of things. I've been involved in like lobbying with a small L. I've been involved in lots of different entrepreneurial endeavors. And then I was also a January 6th defendant that was caught up in that mess. We can get into that later.
Oh, we're going to.
Yeah. It's the right time.
Absolutely.
As far as news goes. So I'm just a person that really enjoys the outdoors. I'm very family oriented. I kind of have a anthropologist type mind. I'm interested in cultures. I'm interested in people. I speak Spanish. I practice languages for fun. My son speaks 3 languages. He's 13. He speaks
That's awesome.
Chinese and Spanish. We're just very hardworking, American-loving, freedom-loving people. We really believe, and I was raised, and I was so grateful that my great-grandmother passed this down through the generations, that we believe in the human opportunity to actualize. And America is the first country. That's when the lights came on, baby. There's that book, what is it, The 5,000-Year Leap? Yep. And it's when we were able to use our talents to better our lives. And by doing so, we lifted the culture, we lifted society. And now you got light switches, you got the internet, you have antibiotics, all this stuff, just because people were allowed to pursue their dreams. And, in life, you have your aspirational goals in your career, then you have your hobbies. And in America, we're able to pursue all those to a tremendous degree. And so I think that there's something that's been lost in our culture, and that's the celebration of that, the celebration of the pursuit,
absolutely,
the celebration of the self-evolution and how you can get yourself to grow in so many different ways. And that's what I'm trying to impart upon my children. And I think that the one thing that they can't measure is desire. And in America, desire can turn into profit. Desire can turn into innovation, and it can help out your neighbor. It can help out your society. It can help out yourself. And I'm just glad to be an American. And I think we're in a comeback. I think we have a big struggle that's going to, but yeah. I do believe the light is going to defeat the darkness, and we are shining at high lumens. Right now in society, what we have, Adam, and I know you're familiar with this, I'm a little familiar with your background, is what we have is we're in a situation where the ideas of the far left got into power, however they got into power, but they had the opportunity to broadcast and implicate their ideas in society. Those ideas failed.
They did.
Okay. And so now we have the kicking and screaming of a defeated beast. And it's dangerous. It's flailing. It can hurt us. But at the end, those ideas that since their birth in the French Revolution and within the birth of communism and Das Kapital, those ideas have failed and failed and failed and failed. And we're going to be in a post-communist society soon, but there's going to be a tremendous struggle ahead. And I think that's where we find ourselves as a country right now.
Yeah, and nobody wants to talk about, like, the French Revolution was a failure. Nobody actually understands the history of what happened in France, like, that was happening right around the same time as our revolution. And this is why, like, you have traveled more countries than I have, but, like, I try to give this perspective to so many people, is that if you don't travel around the world and see how goddamn lucky you are to live in the United States, like, I don't understand what to tell you. You think we have problems here? I mean, I said, you and I both just got back from the UK recently, right? And I'll even tell you, no offense, the UK just doesn't have it, right? Like, their plumbing doesn't work. You're even in London,
GDP, the average GDP per capita, so the GDP per capita of the UK is less than Mississippi.
Yeah, Mississippi it is.
Mississippi is number 50 in the United States. It's the bottom, okay? So what's happening now
They're so poor.
Those ideas have been embedded. A big portion of the population of Europe has been indoctrinated for generations into leftism.
Yes.
And so they've been able to embed themselves in the bureaus and all the different administrative agencies. And so now those ideas are failing. And it's so wild to me that when people
they're getting arrested for tweets.
Right. And so
it's nuts.
These people, you know, when you get an education, especially if you pay for it, you don't just purchase your education. You make an emotional purchase, and you don't want to believe that you've been indoctrinated. It's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they've been fooled. And
Great point.
so people for generations have been indoctrinated into leftism. For young people, unfortunately, they haven't been able to see the change of what, like people, maybe when you were younger, when I were younger, we had a better America than we have now.
Yeah, I was a pre 9/11 kid, so I remember what America was like before that. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
everything changed after that. And people who were born after 9/11, they don't understand the post GWAT world. They just and what
So
came
we
before it.
lost a lot of freedoms as a result.
Yes,
We lost freedoms
Patriot Act.
of safety, which is just what Thomas Jefferson said would occur, because he identified the weakness in the American system, and or the weakness in the human condition, which is what the forefathers did. Is they built a plan that addressed the failures of the human psyche and its quest for power. And so what we're left with is a society, a worldwide society that has, I guess, since maybe the 20s, we've been in this Keynesian system where we have tremendous amount of power at the top, and the people at the top are diehard believers into the strength of the state versus the strength of the individual. And you can see, if you look at the GDP, if you look at innovation, what's happening around the world, it's slowing down. And and you have societies from an economic perspective that are really upside down with debt, and you have a very unhappy populace. And so you have a situation where people cannot have babies because they can't afford to. So
100%. That'll kill your country. Is losing your culture.
And so in Western European countries and Western civilization in general, say maybe in South America and some countries, you have and Mexico, you have this situation where people can't afford to have children. So I was we were talking about, both of us went to Scotland here recently. So I was in Scotland, I was doing a little hunting over there, and we had this amazing cook, and he had one child. And I was encouraging to have more, as I do to people, because I really feel like if you want to be happy, you got to watch your children develop, and you got to invest in them. Absolutely. And the response was a very sincere one. He's like, we just cannot afford it. So imagine you're making less than Mississippi money and trying to raise a family in a place that you're burdened by taxes, you're burdened by high housing costs. There's a housing crisis.
Everything's like 2 to 3 times more expensive over there. It's insane. Like, I'm just like, I am complaining about how much money I had to spend over here, and you guys have to live it every day, you know, and I'm just saying, and I make way more money than the average, you know, UK person. Like, it's just wild to me that they are like, well, this is just how it is. And for me, it was like, you've seen Monty Python or the Holy Grail, like the scene when he's walking up to the castle, and they're both, the peasants are just throwing mud at each other. Like, they're like, who's king today? They're like, well, you can't be a king because I'm a conservative, like, serf over here. And then next week we'll switch it to this man because power can't be distributed between the people. And I'm like, that's exactly the way this is. Like, Monty Python had it correct.
Yeah. And so a lot of people don't understand the history of what happened that resulted in the Constitution. And it wasn't just our situation with England. It wasn't just the taxes on tea and taxation without representation. There was thousands of years of history. The founders of our country they had read Tacitus and the annals of Rome. They had understood the serf system, the feudal system. And so people were slaves. In Western Europe, people were slaves. They called it serfs, so they called it the feudal system. And either you had to work the lands of a landowner and fight in his wars, and at times allow him, the Lord, to have intercourse with your wife on the night of your marriage, because they had the right of prima nocta and
prima nocta, Braveheart, yes,
first night. And so in serfdom, what happened is that even if you were a very talented person, there were many talented serfs. You were still chattel. You were still property of the nobility, and you were not allowed to improve your own life. So they had tremendous problems with alcoholism, because people could not receive the benefit of their labors, and they were still slaves. So no matter how talented you were, you could not benefit yourself and your family. You were held down. There was a boot on your neck, and you made that boot, and you put the food in the mouth of the man that stood on you. And so the people were slaves. And in the late 1800s, over in Russia, there was a serf woman, and there was nobility in Russia that had up to 200,000 serfs, up to 200,000 slaves. And they would put on, they had so many serfs that they had their own amphitheaters, and all of the staff, all of the actors, all of the singers, all of the backstage people were all serfs. And they would put on productions, and people would be beaten if they didn't sing right or if they didn't get their lines right. But there was a particular woman that was extraordinarily talented, and she was a serf and a singer, and she ended up marrying one of the nobility, one of the men that was the wealthiest in Russia. They had a son, and the fact that he married a serf turned everything over in society, and everyone was appalled that someone would allow this to happen, because they needed to maintain this idea that you could not break out of serfdom, because they didn't want it to get in the minds of the people of which they ruled. And the child of that couple ended up being friends with the Tsar Dmitri, and in 1861, Dmitri released all the serfs in Russia. And that was a tremendous encouragement to Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. And so that started lighting off a fire. There were some other countries that had a lot of slavery previously, but we saw this history, and the founding fathers were very familiar with the human condition. And what it is once we have power, we abuse it, and we can't help it. It's the Lord of the Rings. It corrupts us. Yes. And so they decentralized power. And as you could imagine, in monarchical Europe and throughout the rest of the world, the fear that put in leaders. And so, we had the war 1812. They did everything they could to oppress this idea. And it ended up liberating most of the Western world in one form or another. And so what we have now is we're back in a situation where they call it a different name, but leftism is still it's a similar form to monarchy, because now the kings are just called the premier, or the monarchy is the ruling party. And so just like you had nobility that ruled most of Europe, in China, you have the Communist Party, of which there's 70 million people that rule the other billion people in the country. And so we're now in a struggle of globalism, globalist leftists that wish to centralize power. And the problem is their ideas fail when we saw Charlie Kirk. I don't know that Charlie Kirk ever really lost the debate, because his ideas were founded in the truth, of which is similar to what the Constitution was, is that all men are created equal, and these unalienable rights are given to us by God. And for whatever reason, people are very sympathetic to that argument. And it's because there's a nature in us that we do want to actualize, and given the opportunity, we will. And so now we're just kind of in the crux again of this fight for personal freedom. And I know that's a very important struggle to you. It's very dear to your heart, and it is to me as well.
Yep. Yeah, and people don't understand this. Like, I was a registered Democrat when I was 18 in New Jersey, right? Like, because one, I didn't know any better, but like the Democratic Party when I was growing up was completely different. It was like the working class, the blue collar, the Bruce Springsteen, the mercantile industry in New York City. My dad worked extensively in embroidery in Monarch, New Jersey. And I grew up like swinging hammers and mowing lawns and all this other stuff. And like, and when I moved out to Colorado, when I got accepted to the Air Force Academy, I'm like, oh wait, I can have guns. This is awesome. So I switched. Affiliations after that, even to the libertarians for a little bit, because when you're young, you're a teenager, you don't really understand politics. And I think this is the biggest problem with Americans today is you take your government system for granted. And if you don't participate in it, you have no right to endure the freedoms of it, right? I always tell people you have two choices in this country. You can be a citizen or you can be a resident. And a resident shits, sleeps, eats, takes their kids to soccer practice, bitches on social media, and doesn't really do anything. But if you're a citizen, it's like our founding fathers said, right? To this we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, because it requires sacrifice. They lost everything, their families, their homes, they got everything burned down, because this is worth fighting for. And people don't. And people don't understand that is that liberty is so fragile in this country. I mean, we gave a lot of it up in the Patriot Act, but because of your inability to participate other than turning on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or whatever other social media, thing that's out there. And if you just want to, because you're so comfortable in this country, oh, I can plug my cell phone in, I can flush my toilet, I can go to the grocery store and there's food.
Yeah,
So
very
what do I need to fight for? I don't need to fight everything.
right.
I got everything I need. And that's the problem is that you have the best of the worst for the most part ruling this country. And it's been that way for a very long time. And you saw, especially as the wars progressed in Afghanistan and Iraq and everything was starting to wind down, people, they had to have something to fight about. Because they have everything. They have everything. They have paved roads, and you've been to countries where this doesn't exist.
There's
Right?
something right. There's something in us that wants a cause, and you touched on a lot of things. And earlier when you said that travel really illuminates the beauty of the American system.
Yes.
Some of our infrastructure is not what it used to be. We can go to countries and we can see, like in the UAE and Dubai and Qatar, you can go to the airports and you can see that, okay, these people are investing in their country in a different way. But when it comes down to freedom, it's unparalleled in the United States.
Correct.
And we have to ask ourselves, as I just want to reference that you said there's a difference between being a citizen and a resident. As a citizen, you have a duty to the rights granted to you by God. And
yes, more obligation.
There's more obligation than a resident. A resident enjoys the benefits, where a citizen, he enforces his rights on the government. And it brings a question, and this is a delicate topic, and you can and people don't like it when I talk about this. And sometimes, I'm a person that's had their freedom restricted before because of my beliefs. But you have to ask yourself, how governable did the forefathers want us to be? They wanted us to be very lightly governable. He wanted
almost
us
ungovernable.
He wanted you to be ungovernable, right? This is the tree of liberty. Needs to be refreshed with every so often with the blood of tyrants. There's talk like this coming out of the people that founded our country. And so what's interesting is that many of them died to bring those ideas to light.
Yep.
And now 200 and some years, 250 years later, by simply speaking of the founding fathers and their ideals such as this, you risk your freedom. Right, you risk being canceled, you risk your career, you risk your freedom, and so as we are seeing in recent times, if the government wishes to prosecute you, or the government wishes to take their ability, a prosecutorial discretion is the most unadulterated authority in the United States. There's an old saying that you can indict a ham sandwich. You can get a grand jury together, and if you want to get someone arrested, you will get them arrested, and the process is the punishment. So they don't have to convict you. They didn't get me in prison, but I spent $1.2 million fighting for my freedom, right? So, and my name, now I'm just, they treat me, hey, Brady, some kind of crazy extremist, when all I am bringing forward is the ideals in which the country was founded on. But we do have to ask ourselves, at what point do we become the people resigned to oppression, and at what point do we be citizens that enforce our freedoms on the government? And how you do that, of course, you get involved, right? There's an involvement, but there's other things. I don't condone violence. I'm a Christian guy. I don't want to hurt anybody. But civil unrest, when there's just this point where Atlas will shrug, and and at some point we're not there right now. But if the leftists retain power, that's something you have to ask: are you going to shove this oppression off your back? And I think people now, because of people like you, and because of people like Elon Musk, there's been so many ideas that have been proliferated, and truth has such a powerful effect on people that we're not buying it anymore. It's not the days when there was ABC, CBS, and NBC, and the truth is what they decided to tell us that day. Whatever agenda, whatever indoctrination bullet we were going to be fed, we don't digest that anymore. People got heartburn. They don't believe it. Things don't pass the smell test that once were easily consumed and implemented by the intelligentsia. So I'm excited that the American people their their bullshit detectors are highly calibrated instruments now, and
Yeah,
that's a
it's
that's a
sad that that's what it took, though. I mean, like for me, like I'm even still fighting the system. Like I fought the government for 15 years. They destroyed my name, dragged me through the mud, absolutely assassinated my character. I finally got my commission back in the army, and spent over $250,000 of my own money fighting these clowns in court, in and out. I'm still fighting them. Like the crazy part is, even though I won my case and I got my commission back at the Air Force Academy, they're still saying, well, you still owe us 200, whatever $1,000, and also we're still not giving you your degree back, and also you're still a piece of shit on the Air Force side. I'm like, I don't understand this. I've been in the Army for over 12 years with a combat deployment. I proved what you guys were covering all this stuff up, within the military, and the military, like it was way different when I joined in 2006. But like there's so much brokenness inside from these corrupt generals and leaders that led us down a 20-year GWAT war where my friends got killed for absolutely no reason,
right.
right? And people can go back and look at what happened with 9/11 and what happened with the invasion of Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're just like, yeah, we told you so, right? And the funny thing is like people like you and Nick, we cut our teeth in oil and gas, basically, right? And if it wasn't for the energy industry, there is no way in hell I would have been able to pay my lawyer fees or even buy a home or anything like that.
Right.
Or even you pay your legal fees to defend yourself. And some people, they don't have that financial opportunity, and they're still stuck in the system, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because like you said, once you get involved in the legal system in the United States, like you are mostly screwed. There's nothing you can do to get out of it. And you experienced that. And like we said before the podcast, like I was in the National Guard with the 19 Special Forces Group when that was all going on. And they kicked us out the door of a C-130, and we're on ground, and they're handing us live ammunition. They're like, all right, basically get ready to shoot American citizens. You've been deputized as sheriffs. We're going to war with the American people. And I sat there and went, who is in charge of this? Right? And there's congressmen shaking our hands, loading us up on the planes, doing all their pictures, getting us on the ground. And we get out there, and I'm like, wait a minute. First of all, like we got there a few days after January 6th happened. We were the contingency that responded. And I'm just like, so where's all the broken, destroyed stuff on fire, and the end of democracy? I thought this was going to be like Olympus Has Fallen or something like that. And I get down there, and I'm like, I'm walking through Nancy Pelosi's office, like hanging out in her chair, doing a national treasure tour like Nicolas Cage through the basement going, yeah, so this is all made up. Like there was nothing even remotely close to how they depicted it on the news. And the problem is that the American people are so indoctrinated to believe everything that they see on the internet that unless you're physically there and you were there walking and talking to people while they're bitching about walls. Meanwhile, they're having to set up constant tier wire and all these things around their offices and their houses. And I'm like, this is insane. This is what, and you could tell people like, this is what really happened. And this is what is going on. They're like, well, you're lying. You're just a Donald Trump puppet. I'm like, no. What are you talking about? Biden's president. We stood at his inauguration. It was hilarious. We stood at his inauguration. We formed a 2,000 person wall around the inauguration, around the steps of the Capitol. And there was like maybe 50 to 100 people there.
Yeah.
That was it. And they zoomed all the cameras in to make it look like this whole place was filled and there's all these people. And we're all standing around like there's just nothing. The National Mall is empty. And we're like, this is wild. Like, this is wild that this is what's really going on. And people don't know any better.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, man. And I really want to bring this home for people so they understand the crux of it. So they brought in the military, right?
Yep.
There's a wide variety of perspectives in the military. It brings in all kinds, right? You do get a lot of conservative people, maybe more than not, but you have other people that have different beliefs on the ground. Now, amongst people amongst people in the military, how many of them you think would have fired on American citizens if they were given the order?
Honestly, like the guys I was with and the group that I was with, zero. I mean, we even walked around, we taped all our mags shut. We're just like, even because I'm like, you have privates, you have dumb 18-year-olds, right? Yeah, things would happen in the fray of war if something really went down. And I'm like, unless you are actually being threatened and your life is being threatened, like, don't even think about taking that mag and throwing it in your mag well. Because we don't need a repeat of what happened with Ohio State or whatever it was with the National Guard back, during the Civil Rights Movement and everything. But I'm just like, could you consciously even comprehend shooting another American citizen over their right to protest their constitutional rights, if that's what it came down to? And I had a discussion with a lot of my young guys. And like I said, the post 9/11 generation, is the generation I worry about the most. Now, all the guys in my generation where we grew up, in the 90s, right, and everything else, we have a much different perspective on freedom and everything. And the young guys just don't get it. I mean, heck, I had privates who didn't know who Osama bin Laden was. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But that's the reality I live in now, right? But I mean, I would say that there might have been, depending on where they were from. It really depended on the state. Like you probably had like the New York National Guard, which is probably more liberal in their leanings and everything else. But all the good old boys from Missouri, even most of them from Colorado and Texas, like absolutely not. We all just stood, hung out. We actually had more interesting conversations with the people on the ground who were protesting or standing near the walls, and we really just connected as Americans. We all kind of uniformly just said, these politicians are just screwing with us. Like, this is all made up. But you have to be non-political in the military. Once you have a uniform on, you can't, you have to be bipartisan on everything. But it would have been, I think the chances of an actual U.S. soldier shooting an American citizen was very, very low. Once you were on the ground and you saw what was going on, you're just like, no, this is all.
I hope it's still that way.
Yeah.
And either way, I don't care what you're protesting. I really don't. You could have an Antifa uniform if you're just protesting,
non-violently.
You shouldn't be shot. But it is interesting to see when you said it depends on where you're from, because it's just like Bertrand Russell said that sin is regional. Well, well, so is belief. And depending on where you received your education, indoctrination, and what was going on, there's people that probably would fire on American citizens. But as we go back to January 6th, and I think, if you don't mind, can we touch on this for a little bit?
Yeah, no, for sure. And the one thing I wanted to bring up too, to go into this talking point, is that it's also the lack of faith in Christianity in this country that I think affects your decision-making process. Like I grew up as an Irish Catholic on the East Coast and out here, and I would say that most American soldiers who are grounded in faith and put that above on their decision-making process versus doing what they're told by a bunch of atheists really makes a difference, right? You see people that grow up with morals are better decision makers, no matter what your religion is, for the most part, even though we are a Christian nation by definition, from Trinity Church versus U.S., right? But it's the people who grew up without morals, who grow up without a system outside of the documents that founded this country, which are also all founded on Judeo-Christian values, right? It's those kids you have to worry about, and it's those people that the government and the media really go after, because they come off as their basis of belief and what is right and what is wrong. And people have to understand we answer to a higher power. And if you don't understand that, you think that your actions have no consequences, then of course you're going to do whatever the media wants you to do, right? So tell me about your story, what happened with you on January 6th and how you got wrapped up in all that. Because I know several guys, like I advocated for a lot of them getting out of prison, like Captain Chris Cooney from the Marine Corps. They raided his house, killed his unborn baby, basically, stressing out his wife and everything. So I'm always fascinated to hear the perspectives of the people who are actually involved in that, because especially someone who's involved directly afterwards, it's something that Americans highly misunderstand about what was going on, especially with the given recent news media, when the FBI is admitting that they had agitators on the ground pushing guys through the windows, right?
Yeah. So when we say that there's 275 FBI agents, and there's 26 FBI informants, what that does not include is how many people from DHS were there, how many other government contractors were there.
Correct.
If you haven't talked to William Pope at Free State Will, who was a January 6th defendant, the most ardent researcher, a man that devoted himself, very religious man, that completely enveloped his life watching videos for 16 hours a day. He's the one that discovered the Metropolitan Police and the undercover Metropolitan Police pushing people up the rafters, pushing people up, encouraging them to go towards the Capitol, screaming, "Go, go, go." And they were assisting in quote, rioting and encouraging it. And we did not get all the undercover police officer footage of what happened that day, but William Pope found some of it. And I would like you to talk to him. But
yeah, absolutely.
There was a tremendous amount of people that were caught on video that were plain-faced. These not just the people that had their faces covered, that were the primary breachers of police lines at various locations on the Capitol that day. Those individuals not only were not prosecuted, they were never identified, They were never put on the most wanted list. Now, if they're tracking down grannies and using facial recognition to find the most obscure person to charge them with a misdemeanor,
Yep.
why is it that the most egregious actions of people and those perpetrators that committed those acts, why is it that they weren't sought after, they weren't identified, and they were not prosecuted? Now, I can tell you as a person that felt the weight of the U.S. government come down on them when they have that tremendous amount of resources and wealth, limitless wealth to put against you. If they wanted those people identified, they would have been identified, and they weren't. So where I came into the Capitol through the Upper West Terrace. I was led in by a police officer that had been allowing people in, and the doors opened at the exterior doors of the Upper West Terrace. An alarm was going off, which drew attention to the door. But then people were coming out and saying, the police are letting people in. And as we walked and approached, we could see a police officer that was opening the door. And so as I walked up to that door, the door started to close, and the police officer pushed the door open and stood aside. As we entered, we walked up some stairs, and as we go up the stairs, there's a police officer up there that says, you're allowed in so long as you don't destroy anything. He said that to my co-defendant. And so we were under the belief, and certainly just a reasonable person seeing the police officer letting people in, that we felt that they not only encouraged it, but that there were police officers that were pro-protester. Now, I think there's kind of a combination, because January 6th is a complex event. It was a complex day.
Sure.
I believe that there were people that were encouraging, that were bad actors. I believe those people were there, and I believe they were numerous.
There are in every crowd. And
then I believe there was also police officers that were just pro-Trump, pro-protester, that said, let them go get their piss and vinegar out. Let them walk through. These guys aren't going to hurt us. They had their backs turned to us. They never demonstrated any physical or behavior or verbalized that they were in fear of themselves. Quite to the contrary, they were shaking hands, giving hugs, patting people in the back, telling you stuff like, if I wasn't working today, I'd be there right there with you. And I believe a lot of that was sincere. I believe that they were just people that said, hey, this is bullshit. This election is bullshit. And I believe in time, Adam, that we'll find out that election was a corrupted event. I think that more and more is coming out. And at the end of the day, I think that you will find that not only were the protesters right, I feel like they were doing their duty as citizens. And that's where I sit on it. So after I went home, I wasn't when we went back to the hotel that day. We walked through the Capitol. We did we're given the grand tour. I got up to the we went into the gallery, and not the chamber. We looked down in the gallery. Some people jumped in. We said it's time to go. And as we left, we were trying to walk around the floor, and there was a group of protesters walking around the floor. And suddenly we came to a few officers, and they let Jacob Chansley, the horn guy, the Buffalo Head man, they let him pass through, and they gave him an escort. And we thought, why are they letting that guy through and not us? And so we objected, and we were told that no, you cannot pass. That they got like Gandalf. And so we turned around and went to leave. We left. And we asked a police officer, hey, could you show us an exit? He was very cool. He said, yeah, man, come on. So he's talking to us as we walked through. I at first wasn't at fear of being prosecuted, because I went to law school, and even though they withheld my degree, I had to fight like hell. I graduated part-time law school in January of 21 and May of 21. And I just got my degree yesterday. So hang in there, brother. It's a long fight. So that was 7 years since I started law school. I get my degree, and I finished it in 3. And so I wasn't concerned, but then they arrested my co-defendant, and then I became more concerned. And when they did call me, there was an FBI agent, and he called me and he said, look, I was going to leave. I have a restaurant out of the country. I was going to go there to do some work. And he said, are you planning on leaving tomorrow? I said, yeah. And he said, well, don't, because you're going to be appearing for a magistrate. We're going to arrest you. You're going to have to turn yourself in, and we're charging you with a felony. And I thought, felony? And so they charged me with this obstruction of Congress, which was under the witness tampering statute. And it was a law that was developed for the Enron debacle, when Arthur Anderson and Enron had the document shredding party. And that they were destroying documents to avoid a congressional investigation. And so what they said is, if anyone in the law, it says anyone that destroys documents, basically, or otherwise obstructs an official proceeding. And they were talking about evidence impairment, that people were impairing evidence. And so they charged us with this evidence impairment statute. And that's what, tampering with a witness is like tampering with evidence. So he has evidence that he's going to present to the court through his own testimony. And people would scare or extort or threaten these people or kill them. And so the evidence wouldn't come up. And so they put this document destruction statute under that. And it ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court in Fisher versus the U.S. and in the United States versus Fisher. And the Supreme Court, even Ketanji Jackson, they said this is bullshit. It doesn't apply. And so we got rid of the felony. And then I was left with 9 misdemeanors, and they reduced that down to one. And I did 3 mock trials with Dr. Phil's old jury selection company. And his partner took that on after he did some jury consulting for Oprah, and when she was getting sued by the Cattlemen's Association, a beef producers association up in Amarillo, Texas, she fell in love with Dr. Phil. She went with him. His partner took the business. Years later, I hired him, and we did 3 mock trials in DC. And what we found out is that there's no way to have a jury of your peers or an unbiased jury. They wanted us all in jail for 30 years. They said we were all cult members. And so we decided to do a bench trial. And so we did a bench trial, and we weren't allowed any experts. We had the world's leading police expert, a guy that had ran security for the Olympics when they were in the United States. And there's this concept of permissive entry. And there was 300 people that were permitted to enter through the Upper West Terrace doors. And we learned that they were not allowing any expert testimony. And all the evidence that we had, and we had so much, we had videos of police officers saying that this was a setup. We had police officers saying, we can't believe they let people in. We had police officers opening the doors and allowing people in. And we showed all this to the mock jury, the mock jurors. And what they said is, that doesn't matter. You're a Trump follower. And because you believe it. So, and the other interesting thing is that we did all this bias testing. And so all these prospective jurors were given these surveys, and they asked them, what do you rate your trust in the media? And most of these people got their news from cable networks like CNN and MSNBC. We asked them where they got their news from. Was it Twitter? Was it what? And they said those networks. And they asked them, what do you rate your trust in the media? Low, moderate, or high? And 80% of them rated their trust in the media as high. Now, That's crazy. Even if you're a Democrat, think about that, man.
That's crazy. Because the media is so ridiculous. I'm an Intel guy, and I can tell you it's all a lie.
Yeah, and so 40% of them, of the prospective jurors, had never had a job. And
that's a problem.
I think 85% of them were either married to, had a family member, or themselves worked for the government. And
also a problem.
And so that was my experience. So now what we come to today is there's more revelations about people working for the government that were involved in January 6th. So what we need is, if there was an authentic investigation, if people really wanted to see what happened, they would identify who these agents are, who these contractors are, who these police officers are, and then you would watch their behavior on those cameras. And so I had a friend, I'm not going to say what agency he worked for, but he was a government employee. And there was many people from the intelligence agencies, from the Department of Defense, from various military agencies that were brought in to analyze the video. And so what's interesting is when you see the amount of resources that were expended to investigate January 6th, it's the biggest investigation in the history of America. So we're talking, there was no military operation, no other prosecution in which the government had this much money to spend on this amount of people to prosecute these kind of crimes. And so they brought in all these agents and all these human resources, and they analyzed every individual on camera frame by frame. Now, 2,000 cameras, 20 something thousand people that were, maybe more than hundreds of thousands outside, and then the 3,000 that went in. They were all analyzed frame by frame, and they were looking, did you say something or make a gesture to an officer that was threatening? Did you make contact? Because any contact was charged as an assault. I mean, brushing shoulders, touching them. And then they were looking, what they really wanted to see is, did anyone have a weapon? And almost no one had a weapon, but they analyzed it frame by frame. Now, how many people does it take to analyze that many hours of 2,000 cameras?
A lot.
To frame by frame every individual's movement, and some of the frames there's 1,000 people in the camera at once. And so we would like to see, who are these people? What did they do that day? There was a lot of people that were breaching police lines, that were telling people where to go, that were directing traffic. There were people that were really strategically positioned to create the herd passing through that we saw. And so I'm hopeful that would happen. Now, I can tell you, there's a group of us that are suing the U.S. government. And what we heard just recently was that they're not cooperating with us. The government.
Gee, I wonder why.
They're not. Now, similar to your case, like in the military, people don't want to admit that they're wrong. People don't want to admit responsibility. And people in the government, they want their jobs. More than anything, they want their jobs. And so,
Brady, tell me if this is the experience you had, because I literally just got a letter from the Air Force yesterday, because I still was in a lawsuit with them. I'm still like hitting on both sides, the military side and the federal side. And we made our case very clear with case precedent that like, you violated my constitutional rights. There's no way any of this is legal, what you did. And like, we proved it. Like, it wasn't even a dispute. But the problem is the military has its own legal system, and they literally messaged me back, the Air Force, and they're like, well, the Department of the Air Force legal system has determined that we're not at fault because we said so, and this case is closed. I'm like, there's no system to go in after that unless you like go to the Supreme Court, and they know you don't have like $2 million to go do that, right? And this is the problem. Like, Pete Hegseth is trying to round up all the generals in Quantico and have a meeting with them, and I hope there's going to be some kind of accountability. But I mean, this is like the same issue we're dealing with the January 6th stuff. Is like, yeah, is there ever going to be actual accountability for Afghanistan? Probably not. Is there any going to be actual accountability for January 6th? Probably not. But the only way that can happen is if people like you in mass utilize the systems that we're entitled to in order to push public opinion. And this is why podcasts like this are so important, is because you can't do this on your own. I can't do this on my own. And the next step after that is getting better elected officials to actually enforce the laws that they're mandated to protect under the Constitution. And that's the issue, is that we don't have enough moral and ethical people that work in the government, because they're so safe and they're so entitled that if you don't enforce what you are sworn to protect, it's never going to happen, because they're going to go like, well, we're bigger than you. We have more money. What are you going to do? And I think this is the issue that you're dealing with now. And the same exact system I'm dealing with is that unless there is actual accountability with good elected officials, and like I said, even the magistrates that were dictating a lot of these cases, you don't even have to be a lawyer to be a magistrate in most of these states in the United States, which is nuts, right? Like these are people that are dictating people's lives. They're not lawyers. They're just like some guy off the street or some woman off the street. And you've seen that. That's why we have, cash free bail and all these other things. And all these people just get released into the streets, and we have stabbings and shootings. And it's just like, Americans must participate in their democracy. Otherwise, you have the best of the worst people that are running these systems and causing them to take away freedoms and their livelihoods from people like you.
Yeah, I think that wherein lies the problem of a lack of virtuous people. So yes. You talked about religion earlier, and our founding fathers, most of them were, I think 80% of them were vowed ardent Christians. And then you had other people that if they didn't vocalize their belief in Christianity, they accepted the values and the importance of the tenets of Christianity, and they implemented it in their lives. And
well, even in the original colonies, you couldn't even be an elected official unless you were some type of Christian, for that exact reason.
Yeah. And so we had virtuous people, and virtuous people they're not attracted to power.
Correct.
Virtuous people, they really want responsibility over their own life. And virtuous people are focused on self-improvement, and power is generally not the best thing if you want to improve your character. And so what we have to do is we have to take, this is a very difficult thing. We have to take the wealth generating aspect out of those offices. And once you do that, so you got to get rid of, the ability to trade stocks with insider information. And you got to get rid of the lack of term limits. You have to put in term limits, and you have to get regular people that were joining, that were participating in the government as officials in the way that the founding fathers intended. The main reason that they chose George Washington as president is they deemed him the most virtuous of the forefathers. And when Madison would speak in the Continental Congress, and he would speak of the role of the president, he would, because he wanted to get these ideas accepted, he would stand behind George Washington, and he would say, now the president will have these powers. And those powers people were very apprehensive of them, but put in the hands of a virtuous man such as George Washington, they weren't as threatened. And so we have to find people that are going to increase. We have to find virtuous people. And I think that's the only answer. Now, for cases like ours, the consequences are so great. If accountability, the consequences are nearly terminal for these people, right? And you're not talking about brave individuals. You're talking about people that chose the government path, which is the path of least resistance, which just guarantees you a livelihood. It doesn't mean it's the best livelihood, but what it is, it's not going to be taken away from you. And if they were to do an honest accounting of the events of January 6th, or like what happened in your case, heads are going to roll. And
and they don't want that. They will do whatever it takes to preserve that system that protects them. I mean, like, I'm literally fighting the Department of Defense / Department of War. Now, granted, it's different people now, but it's like, I don't have billions of dollars to fight for my constitutional rights as a military member. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's insane.
Yeah, you have to have a motivated leader, and all things require leadership. And as we think about people, we all want leadership. Even leaders want leadership. That's why, like Elon Musk, that people tries to hire. You want people to provide an honest, motivated, capable person that has expertise in an area more so than you, to get in front of you and develop and pursue remedies to the problems that we have. And so we have some big issues in our country with the contamination and corruption of those in power, and that's all the way down to the smallest bureaucrat. And so we have to get people in leadership positions that are willing to let the agency suffer for the better of society. And that's very difficult. The administrative states had a long run of parasitic growth. It is very powerful. And until that we get some of the teeth taken out of those agencies, and then we're going to continue to have these problems. And it doesn't matter. And that's the concern. Trumpism, does it die when Trump is gone? There's a high likelihood, right? But
that's an issue we're going to have, is that people are riding high on one man because they need that leadership. They're following this man because he's actually breaking the system. But guys, he's not going to be in power forever. So if we don't participate in our local governments, if you don't run for school board, if you don't run for county commissioner, if you don't do something as a moral and ethical person who demands moral and ethical people to be in office, no one's coming to save you. You need to prepare to self-rescue.
Yeah. So guys, in life, there's no exits. Okay. I mean, you can kill yourself, which is highly discouraged, and I don't think it's good for your family or society. But when you're trying to succeed, or you're trying to develop yourself, you have to look at it like there's no other way out. You have to. There is no other way out, right? There is, like, it's like investing. I've been an investor for 20 something years, and people say, oh, there's money on the sidelines. There are no sidelines. So there's this old statement about politics that if you don't get turned on to politics, politics will turn on you. Now, what I do feel like is Trump has this cult of personality surrounding him, and I don't believe that it ends with Trump. What I think it happens is that people like yourself, people like me, and people younger than us, where they talk about the far right, you haven't seen the far right. The far right is coming. We are classical liberals than in the sense of the forefathers was
100% accurate.
But we are.
There's a whole group of Americans that are completely self-sustaining that live in the woods that have not been active yet, and you don't want them to come out. And you know who those people are, right? Like, you're from Missouri, I'm from Colorado. Like, I know that these people exist. And the last thing you want is the last offender. Like, they're the guys that are waiting for the government to completely collapse for them to save the country themselves. And those people exist. And no, you have not seen them because they stay out of the limelight.
And I think that they're growing in number. And by the ostracization of the young white Anglo-Saxon male, you put them in a position to where they have nowhere else to go. They had to go to far right to find acceptance. And so those individuals, they will ascend. And if they don't ascend, they'll do something else. They'll ascend to power, or they'll take it. And I think that you're going to find that there's going to be a pendulum swinging as the elections are tightened up, and you have this tremendous movement. And these ideals are pretty infectious once light is shed on them and they're transparent. But you're going to see what it's going to be something along the lines of a nightmare for the modern liberal once people that are about 15, 20 years younger than me, or maybe maybe the guys that are teenagers now, they are so sick and fed up. They're like a stopped up commode. They ain't taking any more shit. They're not buying this. And a lot of these guys don't even look at social media anymore because they're so saturated with it. And so they don't watch Fox News. There's no way to access them. And if you did, they're not buying your bullshit. So I do feel like that what we're looking at is in the next 20 years, you're going to see a very ardent right wing that maybe even you and I aren't comfortable with. I mean, I was hunting in North Carolina years ago. I was doing a bear hunt in the winter of 2020, and Sunday came around and we weren't allowed to hunt till noon. We weren't allowed to hunt till church got out. And I thought, well, that's a pretty crazy rule, right? Well, think what's going to happen when these people that are so far right, they get into power. There's going to be a level of imposition by these individuals that is going to be pretty fierce. And it's a consequence of, it's just the physics of it. If you push in one direction, there's going to be equal and opposite reaction. And they have pushed these kids so far down at them. They have told them they're worthless. They've told them their manhood is toxic. Their ideals are toxic, that they themselves are the problem. And you can't do that to people for their lifetime and expect there not to be blowback. So,
well, and the thing is that we've seen it because, like, the left has been in that position of power already. We saw it under the Biden administration where the far left, right, got into positions of power, took away so many freedoms from Americans, and they started pushing buttons to these people who I just call them the woods people. I'll just leave it at that, right? Where it's like, hey, wait a minute. We didn't ask for this. We didn't vote for this. We don't normally care what you guys do in Washington, D.C. But now when you're shooting, when Mike Waltz is activating the National Guard and SWAT teams to go down the street and shoot their citizens with paintball guns standing on their front porch because they're not wearing a COVID mask, like, what do you think is going to be their response in the future if you keep pushing them? Yeah, right?
It's not going to be good.
What do you think? Because these guys don't have paintball guns. I mean, you know what I mean? They have their own armies in Idaho.
It's not going to be their tag. No, it's not. And so, and the other thing that we have to really concentrate on is, like what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think I like the idea that the government didn't fire him. The government didn't compel them to fire the guy. There were stations that were they were not getting any financial benefit to him being on television.
Correct.
To the contrary. But those licenses in which those media corporations hold,
from the FCC.
And so, if there is going to be lies broadcasted, and if you don't have something like the repealing of the Smith-Mundt Act, or you don't have some way to prevent lies from being propagated, you're going to have a situation where the population at some point is going to determine the media as the enemy. And I think it's pretty close. It's pretty close. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. Does that mean that people ignore it? Or does that mean that there is a demand of a policy change? Does that mean that that people look at them like they look at terrorists? But there's getting to be a point where the rhetoric is so false and so damning that now it's encouraging violence against Americans. We see all these assassinations, ICE agents being targeted. At some point, you're not allowed to scream fire in a theater. You're not allowed to call for violence, and I think that's what we're seeing. So, what consequences will they face? And until we see that happen, I don't think that this is going to improve.
No, and you bring up a really good point, and I think we should make this clear, especially since you have a legal background, and I'm very familiar with this, is that it is not legal to intentionally spread disinformation on public airwaves. There is a law under the FCC licensing to do that, and there's actually one of the reasons they validated pulling Jimmy off was because he was intentionally saying that the guy who, shot at Charlie Kirk was a MAGA right-wing extremist or whatever. Well, that was wrong information. You can't put it out there. Now, to be fair, also in the other context is that yeah, this FCC, legal, not loophole per se, has not been enforced on many other media companies in the past, especially over the Biden administration with COVID and everything else, right? So like, well, rules for thee and not thou kind of thing. However, that's why like Fox News and they have private airwaves. So the rules apply differently, depending on the airwaves you're doing. But if you're on a public airwave, the FCC can pull your license for doing things. I mean, heck, I can't even key up my certain radios that I have here in Colorado without an FCC license because it's all regulated, right? I don't even think Americans are even aware of how those FCC airwave regulations work, but they're very strict. Like if I key up the radio on the wrong channel out here with my, private radio systems that I use for search and rescue and stuff, like they'll come after me and find me or put me in jail. And that's like over a handheld radio. Like, I think Americans are they're just so enamored by believing whatever they're told that this is freedom of speech. And don't get me wrong, Jimmy Kimmel, in my opinion, is free to say whatever he says. I think constitutional rights are great, and freedom of speech is one of the greatest things that we have, and we should never get rid of that. But that doesn't necessarily mean your freedom from consequences. Right. And people don't understand that. And I'm like, so now you're more concerned about some guy who with a low rating on TV is saying something that actively wasn't true to a bunch of low information voters, which we discussed. These are the people being selected for juries, so to speak. Right. But you're not concerned about the guy who just got hit with a 30-06 and was publicly executed in front of his family. And you're trying to equate the two. And I'm just like, what planet are you people living on?
Well, the extremists are the people shooting.
Correct.
I mean, the guy killing people, those are the extremists. And we as individuals and we as a society and we as citizens have a responsibility to protect one another. And if someone's calling for the killing of your child or your family member because of their beliefs,
that's not free speech.
It's not free speech. So real quick, I'm getting ready. I am involved with some major shark fishing operations, and I am going right now as I get off this podcast. I am going to California. I'm with some researchers, and we are going to catch a great white shark this weekend
That's
for
awesome.
research purposes. And
like Jaws shit. You've seen Jaws though, right? Like, don't be the guy in the boat.
Yeah, right. Well, so I hope it doesn't charge it. But yeah, so what I hope is next time that I come on, if you're gracious enough to have me again,
yeah, for sure.
I hope to bring a picture of some sea monster that we've caught. And we're just gonna tag it and release it. But we're seeking a 12-foot or bigger, hopefully 15, 16-foot mammoth of a shark for research purposes. So I'm getting ready to bounce to go do that, old chap.
No, for sure. So, hey, Brady, I know you got to go because you're the most interesting man in the world and you're trying to go out and do amazing things. So where can people connect with you? Where can people find you? Where can people talk to you? All those other things.
Yeah, you can find me on Spotify at World's Most Interesting. You can find me on X under Brady Knowlton. My tag is Vivamus Virum, which is in Latin for live your truth. and or live true. And you can find me on YouTube under Brady Knowlton World's Most Interesting. And we have some really amazing guests coming up. And we're always trying to find you. I'm not here to waste your time, just like you're not here to waste your audience's time. I'm trying to bring you cool shit. And I like talking to people. I like Americans. And I really encourage everyone to support Adam. Adam's out there doing the good work. God bless him. Keep him in your prayers. If you got room in your prayers, say one for people like me and Adam that have been out there fighting this beast. And it is the 1,000-headed Hydra, and we're doing it one round at a time. So thank you for all your service, Adam. I appreciate it, and I mean that in multiple accounts.
No, thanks for hang on for a second as we close out the show. But yeah, follow Brady. Get involved. Like I said, you guys have a choice: be a citizen or be a resident. And if you don't like what's going on, then you have to take up this this crucible yourself and carry your own cross. Because if you don't, the wrong people are going to do it. So it's been an awesome podcast today, guys, and we will see you next time.
All right, thank you, Adam.
Dude, thanks for